Have you ever wondered if the life you are living is truly yours? It's a question that rarely makes it past the surface of our minds. Most days we wake up and slip into our routines like a well-worn coat, familiar, predictable, and a little heavy. We go to work, we talk to friends, we post pictures that capture fragments of our existence. But somewhere in the quiet moments between obligations, something whispers, "This isn't me. This isn't it." Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But before this privilege can be claimed, there is often a long period of imitation, living according to the expectations, rules, and narratives handed to us by others. We become experts at playing roles, sometimes so convincingly that we forget we're acting. And yet, deep in the marrow of our being, we feel it, the subtle ache of disconnection from the person we might have been. It's easy to dismiss this feeling as anxiety, boredom, or just the human condition. But Jung believed it was something far more profound, the self calling us back home. Not the self with a lowercase s, the one that changes masks depending on the audience, but the self with a capital S, the center of our psychological being. The part that exists beyond the stories we tell about ourselves. The paradox is that most of us spend years, sometimes decades, running from this meeting. We fear it because meeting the self often means dismantling the life we've built to avoid it. And dismantling is painful. It requires us to question the script we've been following since childhood. Think about it, how much of what you call you is actually a mosaic of other people's expectations? Parents, teachers, partners, colleagues, each one adding a tile, shaping the image you present to the world. You start to believe that this image is you. And yet, no matter how beautiful or socially acceptable it appears, if it's not authentic, it begins to crack under the weight of living. Jung understood this intimately. He saw that much of our psychological suffering comes not from external events, but from the split between who we think we must be and who we truly are. He called this split the tension between the persona and the self. The persona is the mask. It is necessary, after all, society is a stage and masks help us navigate it. Without a persona, we'd be raw and exposed, vulnerable to every gust of opinion or judgment. But a mask is meant to be worn temporarily. The problem begins when we forget it's there. When the mask becomes fused to our skin, we lose the ability to breathe freely. In the modern world, the fusion of mask and identity is almost inevitable. Social media turns the persona into a product. We carefully curate who we are, the right smile, the right filter, the right caption. And while there is nothing inherently wrong with sharing our highlights, the danger lies in mistaking the highlight reel for the whole film. This is why the first step toward truly living is not about adding more achievements, more possessions, more approval, but about subtracting, peeling away the layers of what is not ours. And this peeling is never glamorous. It's not a transformation that looks good in pictures. It's slow, quiet, and often deeply uncomfortable. The irony is that we are born whole. As children, we are the most ourselves we will ever be, curious, uninhibited, unapologetic. But as we grow, we learn the rules of belonging. We start to hide pieces of ourselves to fit in. We trade spontaneity for safety. And one day we wake up and realize that in order to be accepted, we have abandoned the person we were meant to become. And yet, something inside us resists extinction. The self waits patiently, sometimes for decades, for us to notice it again. It speaks in symptoms: dissatisfaction, restlessness, a sense that we're missing something essential. Many ignore it until a crisis forces them to listen. The loss of a job, the end of a relationship, the collapse of a dream. Crisis strips the mask away. It leaves us face to face with what we have avoided, ourselves. But here's the truth Jung would want us to remember. This moment of confrontation, though terrifying, is also the beginning. It is the first step toward individuation, toward reclaiming the parts of us we exiled in the name of acceptance. So I'll ask you again, what if the life you are living is not truly yours? And more importantly, what would you do if you finally decided to live it? If this question stayed with you, it might be because a part of you is ready to explore the answer. Subscribe to The Human Paradox and let's keep walking this road together, one truth at a time. In the theater of life we all wear masks, not out of deceit but out of necessity. The persona, as Jung defined it, is the social face we present to the world. It is the role we play, the polite voice in meetings, the confident profile picture, the agreeable friend who says, "I'm fine," when they're not. Without it, we would be exposed to every sharp edge of social judgment. The persona is not inherently false. In fact, it can be an essential tool for survival. It helps us navigate the unwritten rules of society, shielding us from rejection or hostility. It allows us to function in workplaces, communities, and relationships without constantly bleeding our vulnerabilities into the open. The danger arises when we mistake the mask for our face, when the performance becomes so habitual that we forget we're acting at all. Imagine a mask that is worn for so long that it begins to fuse to the skin. At first, it feels safe. It keeps the world at a comfortable distance. But over time, it becomes suffocating. The air grows thin behind it. You start to lose the contours of your own expression. That's what happens when the persona takes over. Modern culture doesn't just encourage this, it rewards it. Social media has turned the persona into a brand. We curate our lives for public consumption, carefully selecting what to show and what to hide. The dinner that tasted average but looked beautiful under warm lighting. The vacation where you felt lonely but posted pictures that said paradise. The relationship that's falling apart behind closed doors but appears perfect in couple selfies. And yet, every carefully staged moment builds a kind of invisible debt. The more we invest in the mask, the more we fear the cost of removing it. We start to wonder, if people only love the mask, will anyone love me without it? Jung believed this is why so many people live lives of quiet desperation. They sense the gap between their persona and their self, but they've built their careers, relationships, and identities on the mask. To take it off feels like a kind of death. And in a way, it is the death of the false self. But death, in Jung's symbolic language, is also a doorway. There are moments when life itself seems to conspire to crack the mask. A betrayal, a failure, a sudden illness. Something happens that makes maintaining the performance impossible. And for a brief, raw moment, we stand exposed, vulnerable, real. Many rush to patch the mask back together. But some take that moment as an invitation to finally see their own face. The irony is that people are far more forgiving of our real selves than we fear, but only if we are willing to live from that place consistently. Authenticity attracts authenticity. Vulnerability makes connection possible. Still, the transition is rarely comfortable. You will lose people who only love the performance. You may lose status in spaces that value appearance over substance. But you will gain something harder to measure: the quiet relief of not having to pretend anymore. The freedom of no longer managing an image. The space to breathe in your own skin. The mask will always be there when you need it, for the job interview, for the formal event, for the times when a little distance keeps you safe. But it is no longer welded to your face. You can take it off when the curtain falls, and in the silence of the dressing room, you can see yourself clearly in the mirror. This is where the real journey begins, not in burning the mask but in remembering it's just a tool. You are not the role you play. Every one of us carries a shadow. Not a ghost that follows behind us, but a darker twin that lives inside, silent, patient, and entirely our own. Jung called it the shadow, the collection of impulses, fears, desires, and truths we have rejected or denied. The shadow is not evil. It is not the villain in our story. It is simply the part of ourselves that we have banished because it did not fit the version of acceptable we were taught to uphold. If the persona is the mask we wear for the world, the shadow is everything the mask hides. Think of the traits you dislike most in others: arrogance, cowardice, selfishness, weakness. Now imagine for a moment that you carry those same seeds within yourself. The shadow is not comfortable to face because it forces us to admit we are not only what we admire, we are also what we fear. From childhood we are trained to repress. A boy who cries too easily learns to swallow his tears. A girl who speaks too loudly learns to make her voice smaller. A curious child who questions everything learns to nod in silence. Over time, these rejected parts sink into the unconscious, forming the shadow. The tragedy is that what we repress does not disappear. It waits. And the longer we ignore it, the more it finds ways to show itself in disguise. In Jungian psychology, this is called projection. We see in others the very qualities we cannot accept in ourselves. We judge them for it, not realizing that the judgment is a mirror. In the modern world, this dance of projection is everywhere. Social media amplifies it: outrage, moral posturing, the constant pointing of fingers. It's easier to condemn others than to examine the parts of ourselves that look uncomfortably similar. And so, the shadow grows stronger, not weaker. Jung's warning was simple: until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. The shadow that is ignored will shape our choices, sabotage our relationships, and quietly erode our sense of peace. But the shadow that is acknowledged can become a source of strength. Facing the shadow is not an act of violence, it is an act of integration. It means allowing the darker parts of our humanity to have a seat at the table, not to control the conversation but to be heard. The anger we repress may hold the key to our boundaries. The jealousy we deny may reveal what we truly desire. Even our flaws carry messages. This work is not glamorous. There is no applause for sitting in a room alone, wrestling with the parts of yourself you'd rather bury. But there is liberation in it. The shadow that is faced loses its power to control from the dark. Some people avoid this process their entire lives. Others are dragged into it by crisis. A breakdown, a betrayal, a moment where the old self can no longer hold. But for those who choose to step willingly into the cave, there is something waiting, a deeper, more honest life. And here's the paradox: by embracing the shadow, we don't become darker, we become whole. Light without shadow is not depth, it's blindness. It's the contrast that lets us truly see ourselves. So the question becomes, what have you been running from inside yourself? And what would happen if, instead of running, you turned to face it? At some point, if you are lucky, or perhaps unlucky enough, life will confront you with a truth too large to ignore. You cannot keep living as a fraction of yourself. This is the beginning of what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is not the pursuit of becoming a better version of yourself in the way modern culture markets personal growth. It is, instead, the slow, often unsettling integration of all that you are, the light and the shadow, the conscious and the unconscious, the persona and the self. Imagine your psyche as a vast and ancient city. For years, you have lived in only a few well-lit streets, the parts of yourself you know and show. Individuation is the decision to venture into the unlit alleys, to explore the forgotten buildings, to reclaim the neighborhoods you've abandoned out of fear. Some of those streets will feel hostile at first. You'll find memories you've locked away, traits you've tried to erase. But if you keep walking, you'll also find lost treasures. This process is not for the impatient. Individuation unfolds over a lifetime, often in cycles. You confront one aspect of yourself, integrate it, and just when you feel complete, another buried layer emerges. Jung compared it to a spiral. You keep returning to the same themes, but each time with a little more depth, a little more clarity. The modern world resists this path. Our culture celebrates speed, distraction, and external achievement. We are told to keep moving, keep producing, keep upgrading. Individuation, by contrast, asks you to slow down, to turn inward, to measure life not by the volume of what you have but by the depth of who you are. And it is not without cost. Individuation often disrupts the structures you've built. Friendships that were built on a false self may dissolve. Careers that relied on your mask may lose their appeal. You might find yourself walking away from a life that once seemed like the perfect fit, only to discover it was tailored for someone you were pretending to be. But there is also a strange relief in this shedding. You stop carrying the weight of roles that no longer belong to you. You begin to speak in your real voice even if it trembles. You learn to stand in rooms without bending yourself into shapes that please everyone else. Individuation is not about isolation. It is about connection, but connection built on truth. When you live from the self, the relationships you form are no longer contracts between masks. They are dialogues between whole beings. The work you choose is no longer a performance. It becomes an expression of your deepest values. This is why Jung saw individuation not just as a personal journey, but as an ethical one. The more whole you become, the less you need to project your unresolved shadow onto others. The more you integrate your own complexity, the more compassion you can hold for the complexity of others. But individuation begins with a choice to stop distracting yourself, a choice to stop living on the surface, a choice to sit with what is uncomfortable, and trust that on the other side of discomfort lies a more authentic life. The call is quiet. It rarely shouts. It comes in the form of dissatisfaction, of a longing you can't quite name, of a sense that you're meant for something deeper. Most ignore it until it becomes unbearable. But if you are listening now, perhaps you've already heard it. And so the question becomes, will you answer? No one tells you how disruptive it is to truly meet yourself. We romanticize authenticity as if it were a soft sunrise, warm and golden. But more often it begins as an earthquake. The structures that once felt solid start to shake. Relationships, careers, beliefs, because they were built for the persona, not the self. The first cost is often belonging. When you start living in alignment with who you truly are, you stop fitting into spaces that once welcomed you. Friends who loved your mask may grow distant. Colleagues may sense you no longer share the same ambitions. Even family can feel unsettled, as if you've rewritten the script they thought you would follow. The second cost is certainty. The mask was predictable. It knew its lines, its audience, its cues. The self is unpredictable. It will pull you toward paths you didn't plan for, passions you can't rationalize, and truths you can't unhear. That uncertainty can be terrifying, like stepping into a vast, unmarked landscape without a map. And yet, alongside the loss, something else begins to grow. You gain time. Not more hours in the day, but time that feels like it belongs to you. Moments that are no longer wasted on pretending. Hours that are rich because they are real. You gain integrity, the kind that comes from no longer splitting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You speak words that match your inner world. You make choices that reflect your real priorities, not the ones society handed you. And perhaps most importantly, you gain peace. Not the fragile peace that comes from avoiding conflict, but the grounded peace of knowing you are no longer at war with yourself. Even when life is chaotic, even when challenges pile up, there is a stillness at your center, a place where you are whole. Jung understood that this transformation was not a one-time event. To live as yourself is to choose authenticity over comfort again and again. There will be days you slip back into the mask. There will be moments you long for the safety of your old life. But each time you return to yourself, you strengthen the connection and the mask loses its hold. The modern world will tempt you to abandon this path. It will offer distractions, quick validations, and 1,000 ways to numb the discomfort of growth. But if you have tasted the relief of authenticity, you will find it harder and harder to go back. And so, the paradox reveals itself. The price of meeting yourself is high, but the cost of never doing so is far greater. A life lived entirely for others may earn you approval, but it will never give you the one thing you secretly crave, the sense that you are living your life. This is why Jung's words still echo like a quiet rebellion. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. It is a privilege paid for with courage, loss, and the willingness to stand alone when necessary. But it is also a privilege that repays you every day in freedom, in depth, in truth. And when you finally cross that invisible threshold, when the life you live matches the truth of who you are, something extraordinary happens. You realize that the life you thought was ending was only the prologue. The real story begins here. There is a moment, quiet, almost unremarkable, when you realize you are no longer searching for yourself in the faces of others. You are no longer straining to be understood, no longer bending yourself into the shape that will earn approval. Instead, you wake up one morning, breathe, and feel aligned. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough to know you have crossed some invisible threshold. Life after meeting yourself is not a constant high. It is not a permanent state of bliss. The storms still come. People still misunderstand you. The world still demands masks. But something inside remains untouched, anchored in a way it never was before. This is the paradox. When you live from the self, you are both more vulnerable and more unshakable. You feel more deeply, the grief, the beauty, the fragility of existence, but you are no longer afraid to feel. You have stopped running from your own depths. There is also a humility that arrives here. You see that the journey didn't end when you found yourself. It began. Meeting the self is not a final destination, but the opening of a lifelong conversation. You will lose it and find it again many times over. And each time the path back becomes a little clearer. You begin to see others differently too. You recognize their masks without judgment. You sense the shadows they carry without needing to expose them. You understand that everyone is somewhere on the same spiral, circling closer or further from their own truth. The modern world may still call you back to distraction, to performance, to the easy seduction of playing a role. But you carry a compass now. And even if you wander, even if you forget for a while, the direction is there, etched into you. This is not the life of perfection but of presence. You taste your days instead of rushing through them. You speak in a voice that is your own even when it shakes. You love without the desperation of trying to fill a void, because you have learned that no one else can complete you. And perhaps that is the quiet gift Jung was pointing toward all along, to live a life that is undeniably yours. Not the life your parents dreamed, not the one your culture sold you, but the one that grows naturally from the center of who you are. It will not always be easy, but it will be real. So maybe the question we must leave with is not have you found yourself? But rather, are you willing to keep meeting yourself again and again for as long as you live? If this journey resonated with you, maybe it's because a part of you is already walking it. Subscribe to The Human Paradox, and let's keep exploring these roads together, where the contradictions of being human reveal the truth we've been searching for all along.